Following a heated clash at the Oval Office, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky turned to the embrace of European leaders, some of which have openly expressed their stance to not stand idly as President Trump of the U.S. attempts to strike a peace deal with Ukraine without the involvement of Ukraine or EU leadership. To help us contextually understand the delicate diplomacy that unfolds before us, we now are joined by Professor Byung-joo of the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
Happy Tuesday to you. What a weekend.
What a weekend, indeed. It's been a while since we got connected through the phone line here. I hope the audio level itself is just fine for our audience.
Crystal clear. Thank you so much for checking up on
That's
us.
Good.
All right. It's hard for us to set aside this stark contrast between what happened in Washington, D.C. as opposed to London. Maybe you can help us understand on a deeper level. So following his fallout with Trump, Ukrainian President Zelensky flew from Washington, D.C. to meet with European leaders in London on Sunday. Can we review what we witnessed in his Sunday meetings first?
Stark contrast, exactly. I mean, comparing what happened Saturday in Washington, D.C. and what happened Sunday in London, very clear contrast. In London, unlike all the fallout that we saw in D.C., in London, we saw Zelensky meeting with the head of the states of UK, France, Germany, and Canada, and other countries. And they were all extending warm hands to Zelensky and expressing their strong support for Ukraine and, settlements, some kind of settlements that will not disregard Ukraine's interest altogether. And some of the leaders were coming out quite strong, talking about raising different possibilities of self-defense and strengthening Europe, NATO's own kind of capability, European powers' own capability to defend themselves. So there are lots of talks there, and Zelensky, especially having experienced that terrible time in D.C., it must be a considerable consolation for Zelensky. But at the same time, however, what we saw was some realist view that, setting aside, I mean, together with all this kind of strong support, moral support from European heads of the states, some of the heads of the states expressed their clear view that one way or another, Zelensky has to go back to Washington and
right. That's undeniable,
right, mend fences with Trump, because whether we like it or not, at this point, United States is the strongest power, and Ukraine cannot really go ahead in a kind of healthy and constructive way, seeking the settlement without United States support. So that point was made quite clear indeed.
Okay.
And one more thing that we saw was that, the different European countries were coming out with different ideas, but one of the interesting ideas was UK Prime Minister Starmer raising an idea about using Russia's frozen asset inside Ukraine that amounts up to $2.8 billion US, and using that Russian asset to continue to support Ukraine's efforts to fight against Russia. So I thought that was one relatively small but still interesting idea altogether. And the last point about what we saw in London was some of the observers and head of states and involved parties were raising an issue about what this all means worldwide. This goes beyond, they were making the point that this goes beyond just the security, issue boundary of the security of European nations, but also it will have ramifications for the security of Northeast Asia. Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, and even Indo-Pacific region. And so they were raising, they were making point that the alliance structure, with or without the United States, will have to be a focal point in terms of working together to strengthen, in order to increase the capability of self-defense going forward.
Professor Kim, can you walk us back to the clash at the White House, too? Going back one more day from that Sunday sit-down in London to Saturday, Zelensky was, of course, in Washington, D.C. What do we make of the shouting match in the Oval Office? Frankly, there was nothing diplomatic about it, nor have I, in my lifetime at least, ever seen something like this.
In your lifetime, you're saying, but the thing is, commentators like a New York Times columnist, Thomas Friedman, he was saying, never in 250 years of the history of the United States, this kind of things happen.
Right.
So much longer than your lifetime.
Thank you for the clarification.
And really, they were astonished. They were shocked indeed. And what's interesting to me was there were some observers who came out, indeed, saying that this had been all planned out by Trump team, and some people are saying even Zelensky as well. But I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it, but I myself observed the video carefully several times. Mm-hmm. But I thought, initially Zelensky was doing his job, playing to his audience back home. He's a president of Ukraine. And he cannot just sit there, right? Accept the Trump's deal without saying anything. And then just saying thank you and we'll accept your deal. We have no complaints. He cannot do that. And he has to go over the history about how untrustworthy Russia is, going over the history. And at that point, J.D. Vance just sprang out and rashing out, and I don't know, he was not acting like a vice president of the great power of the United States. Rather, he was just a commoner, the way I see it, the way he sprang out. And then they were talking about this being all planned, but I'm not sure. Maybe they planned a really wonderful show of division of labor, but initially I thought Trump was trying to hold back, trying to calm it down. And then J.D. Vance went on, and then Zelensky reacted quite strongly. And then later point, Trump came in just shouting and stuff like that. So I'm not really sure. It's either unplanned, a total accident, or extremely well-planned role play of a show. I don't think it's somewhere in between. It's
one or the other.
Extreme cases, right?
I think I gravitate towards the former, Professor Kim.
Right.
It's hard for me to level with the speculation that it could have been staged or planned in any way.
Right, exactly. So, but anyway, we never know. Well, we don't have any strong evidence.
History will tell.
Exactly. But one of the things that we realized is that in Vance emphasizing the point that you have to say thank you to the United States. Well, for the record, Zelensky has been thanking the United States every single time, and then more than once every visit, he was thanking enough. Some people were counting, and some columnists were saying 33 times on the record he's been thanking the United States. The thing is, however, what we notice in J.D. Vance's comment is that he's totally speaking from the perspective of Trump supporters who are not well versed, who are not well educated, who are not well versed in international relations, international affairs. Those people who have close to nothing about international affairs could say that, because those of us who know something about international affairs, not the United States doing totally altruistic action to help Ukraine. Helping Ukraine in the battlefield means trying to defend Europe, trying to work for security of Europe in the face of aggressor. And it was not a totally altruistic thing. The United States was doing it for its own interest, for the interest of U.S. allies, for the interest of the order of the world altogether. So it's not like just giving free money out of a totally kind of like it was not a donation.
Out of the goodness of our heart. But I mean, the way J.D. Vance framed it, it made it seem like you need to approach us with this level of heightened respect because we were doing something altruistic. We got nothing out of it. That's the tone he struck.
Exactly. So it's just totally like a Trump supporters talking about this international affairs without enough knowledge about it. It was not something that could be expected coming from the vice president of the United States. So in that sense, what I saw was rather than just criticizing J.D. Vance, I would see just domestic politics driving the minds of these important players, actors in international affairs, such as the Vice President of the United States and the President of the United States. So that's one thing I saw. And also another thing that I saw was, we have to face the new reality. Many commentators made a point. The world today is different from like a world 10 years ago, 2015. The thing is, United States have been working on kind of taking a step back, retreating from the world of affairs. And that's just thinking about how U.S. withdrew unsuccessfully from Afghanistan under Biden. United States cannot do everything everywhere all together at the same time. That's a fact. And now what needs to be done is face that reality, highlight the reality, but still going with the adult-like professional diplomatic language to balance different interests, right? Together. Right. You can't just say, oh, you have to thank us. We've been doing this all out of altruism and we've been helping you, blah, blah, blah. You cannot say that. And you cannot say, well, we're no longer capable of doing this, so we have to pull out either. And then what that means is still we need something like diplomatic language and the mature way of exchanging ideas and sharing ideas. But what we ended up seeing Saturday was just the domestic politics, U.S. domestic politics of Trump supporters just being played out in the Oval Office that shocked the world.
All right, so the shock is subsiding as we talk about it, try to make better sense of what's next, because what's at stakes is undeniable. This is a peace deal we're trying to strike at a war that's been going on for years. Even in the most important multilateral area, the UN, we heard that the U.S. took sides with Russia and North Korea last week. Could you elaborate further on this front?
Yes, this was a few days before the White House Oval Office fallout on Saturday. Actually, last Monday, there was, I guess, the third anniversary of the outbreak of Ukraine, a Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so different members of the United States, United Nations, were trying to come up with resolutions expressing their concerns and views. And what happened was United States at the General Assembly, where all the members come together, they were trying to introduce their own draft of General Assembly resolution where they did not want to include any criticism of Russia or responsibility for Russia in ending the war and so on. And that was blocked. And it was amended by the European nations. And the United States stayed out of passing that resolution, initially opposing it and then abstaining from it. And in doing so, for this General Assembly resolution alone, the United States took a side with countries like North Korea and Belarus and, of course, Russia. So it was interesting that the United States was taking side with Russia and some of the countries that are not friendly to the Western world, just like North Korea and Belarus, and taking the other side. That was a kind of shocking gesture. But immediately following that, also at the Security Council, not General Assembly, but UN Security Council, United States did the same thing, introducing Security Council resolution that includes no words on responsibility of Russia at all, just a demand to end the war as quickly as possible. And on that one, European nations stayed out of it, and then they passed the resolution. Again, United States taking side with Russia once again. So, within a very short time, U.S. taking side with Russia at the UN was a shocking thing that had been expected, but still, when you actually saw it, it was shocking because 3 years ago, it was the United Nations with the support of the United States passing strong-worded resolution criticizing Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But things have turned around and the world had to face this new reality in UN. So that was what was happening several days before the Oval Office fallout.
Professor Kim, it's as if the guardrails from the first term for President Trump are non-existent, and many say they're losing sleep over what Trump is bringing into the world these days. How do we calculate his next move when these are unprecedented? How do we begin making sense of the second Trump administration stance and, frankly, atypical way of approaching diplomacy?
That's interesting because that is exactly the question that I face almost every day when I mostly my students and people who have questions about what's happening to the world. They raise that question: what is happening to the world? How do we kind of like digest this
and navigate? Right?
Yeah, it's so difficult because all of a sudden, suddenly, we knew something like this was coming, but when we actually face this case, it's like shouting match in the Oval Office. They were saying, like some European media was saying that it was a miracle that they didn't punch their faces, each other's faces in the Oval Office. That kind of thing happening, and the world audience is having great difficulty digesting and understanding the reality. I guess one of the ways of trying to understand what's going on would be the one point that I already made earlier. That is, I really don't necessarily think this is Trump as a person doing everything here. Rather, what we have to see is Trump supporters. Let's think about what Trump wants. What he wants, he's not running for re-election, but what he wants is he wants to remain the hero of his supporters. And even after serving his second term, he may want to remain influential among his supporters. So he's playing to the ears of minds of his supporters. So he's speaking up his supporters' minds, and he's doing things what his supporters want, what he has promised to his supporters. So basically what we saw is things being realized based upon the wishes of half of the United States, basically. Those people who have gone to one extreme, what I've been calling no matter whatism. No matter what happens to Trump as a person, all these problems with his person, we don't care. We support this idea, and we are very much tired of the internationalist, liberalist tradition of the country, and we want to take care of ourselves. That kind of thinking is being manifested in a way, and we don't see in seeing that happening. We see the evaporation of the presence of what we call the wise and hard-thinking Democratic voters. Their presence is evaporating. We no longer see that, and so that's the hard trouble we face here. And alongside with that is trying to understand the world. I think it's reminding us how important it is to hold communities together. What's happening right now, some people have made an argument, is that this is a super rich of the Americans, like, some of the people, we don't want to name them here, I guess, but super rich Americans seeking tax cuts for themselves while kind of taking advantage of the poor, raising tariffs.
Oh, this has been raised several times, right?
Yeah, the Trump administration is continuously introducing tax reductions for the rich for the past several weeks, and then at the same time they're talking about raising tariffs. So combine these together, what happens? It just all hurts the poor. But these poor voters, many of them are supporting Trump. So this is interesting. I wouldn't say political fraud, but interesting way of misleading the people.
It's the irony of the situation, because his main audience that he's speaking to, as you've said, that is his strategy to rally them up, but he's not necessarily helping them on a deeper level. I mean, we haven't even gotten the big I word. What will be made of inflation once all of these tariffs come through? Who will it hurt first? But we'll wait and see.
Exactly.
Professor Kim, as you've mentioned, I mean, it's not just the Trump administration. Perhaps a larger goal for the United States has been taking a step back from world affairs. So what should those of us in Korea then keep in mind with that big picture question?
Most of the reactions that I've been reading since Saturday, especially about what Korea should do in reaction to this shocking reality that's being unveiled in front of us. There have been several different ways of thinking revealed in Korean media. One is, of course, obvious one is the stressing on the need for increasing our self-defense capability. Traditionally, Korea has depended on the United States for the defense of South Korea. And we call it extended deterrence and nuclear umbrella, all these things. And we see voices being raised against that tradition and calling for rethinking of it, ways to come up with to increase our capability to defend ourselves. So that's what we see in many of the editorials in Korean media for the past several days. And other media editorials were saying, well, look, we have to do clear give and take. Trump is very transactional, so we have to make it clear what we can give and what we can demand. That part, I'm not so sure because we don't want to talk about what we can give upfront. This is a negotiation, and we don't want to reveal our cards before the actual negotiation table is being opened and stuff like that. So the second point about give and take, let's make clear what we can give and what we can take back. I think the time-wise, careful strategizing on that point is critical. So while the argument itself is correct, I don't think revealing our cards is a wise one. And last point is that some people were making point that there will be midterm election coming up 2026. So that's about less than 2 years from now. After that, Donald Trump will become lame duck. Some people were claiming. So we have to bear with this for about less than 2 years, and after that, who knows what happens. So don't feel so bad, some people are saying.
There's an end to this unpredictable journey. Right. But we appreciate it, Professor Kim. I think I understand on a much bigger context.
Just to make us feel better a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, a glimmer of it.
Right.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for your insights. We appreciate it. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.